So I want to talk a little bit more about the president's veto authority. The first thing you need to know is that the framers did not give the president an absolute veto. What do I mean by an absolute veto? An absolute veto would be that Congress passes a law or a bill, and they send it to the president, and the president vetoes it, and it's dead. An absolute veto is what the king used to have. If he vetoes it, it's dead. There's nothing Congress can do. The framers did not want to give a president that kind of authority. Everything was supposed to be checks and balances, right? The branches were supposed to keep one another in check. But they didn't want to give any one branch the ability to dominate the other branches. And so they said, okay, president can veto bills if he thinks that they're poorly written or they're unconstitutional. And so he sends the bill back to Congress. But what Congress can do, is they can override the veto. If 2/3 of the members of the House and 2/3 of the Senate say, we've read your objections and we disagree, Congress can pass the law and disregard the veto. They're like, thank you for sharing, but we're passing it anyways. Congress can just override the veto. And when that happens, because the job of the president is to see that the laws are faithfully executed, it's the job of the president, to carry out the law as passed by Congress. Even over the president's veto. The president wasn't supposed to go, hey, I vetoed that bill, I don't like it, and so I'm not implementing it. That wasn't the job of the president. The president's job was to faithfully execute the laws. Now, if the law was poorly written, it might be a challenge for the president. How do I do this? I don't understand what they want here. In a way, that gives the president a bit of a latitude to do what the president wants. So, the president doesn't have an absolute veto. Congress can override the veto. Also, the other thing that the president doesn't have is what's called a line item veto. A line item veto. Now, what do I mean by a line item veto? Imagine you have a bill and it's got 5 different sections. Let's say the president likes section 1 and section 2 and section 3, but he thinks section 4 is poorly written or section 4 is unconstitutional and he's okay with section 5. What the framers did not give the president the ability to do was just veto section 4. The president has to veto the entire bill or none of the bill. It's an all or nothing thing. Now the president, if section 4 is the problem, the president vetoes the entire bill, sends it back to Congress, says, hey, look, I'm cool with everything in this bill except for section 4, and here are the reasons why. If you fix section 4 and you pass it again and send it to me, I'll sign it. But what the president can't do is say, okay, you know what, I'm going to sign section 1, 2, and 3 into law. I'm going to veto section 4, and I'm going to sign section 5 into law. Veto power is all or nothing. You veto the whole bill, or you veto none of the bill, that's it. Now, this is going to become important later on when we talk about presidential signing statements. So I want you to just think about this, and this will make more sense when we talk about presidential signing statements. The framers did not give a president an absolute veto, right? Congress can override the veto. And the framers did not give presidents a line item veto. They have to either veto the whole bill or none of the bill. Well, it turns out that presidential signing statements can sometimes be almost exactly like an absolute line item veto. It's almost like the president is picking a part of the bill out and saying, I've decided this is unconstitutional and there's nothing Congress can do. Now, if that seems wrong to you, good, you're paying attention because it is wrong. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, so I'm introducing this concept now. Let's continue on with the formal powers of the president. The other power that the president has is the power to negotiate treaties. This actually isn't in the Constitution, but it was in a very famous court case where the Supreme Court said that the president is the sole voice of the nation in foreign affairs. So when the president is the one who, if the president is interested in negotiating in a treaty with a foreign country, then the president can either go himself or eventually herself, or the president can send a representative to negotiate treaties, but only the president can do that, or the president's representative. Congress can't negotiate treaties. Governors of states can't negotiate treaties. Only the president can. Now, in case you're not familiar with what I mean by a treaty is an agreement between our country and another country. It is a binding agreement, right? It becomes essentially law. So that gives presidents a lot of authority. They're the ones by themselves who can go ahead and negotiate treaties with other countries. But when the president negotiates a treaty with a foreign country, this agreement that is binding, not just on the president, but on the next president and the next president and the next president, when the president negotiates a treaty, before it can become law, the Senate has to approve the treaty. And not only that, but it doesn't just require a simple majority. 2/3 of the Senate has to approve of the treaty before it can become law. Again, this is that idea of checks and balances. The framers gave presidents a lot of authority to be the sole voice of the nation. In foreign affairs, the president's the only one who can go and negotiate on behalf of the country. But the Senate, in this case, not the House, the Senate has the authority to approve or not approve of those treaties. And if the president doesn't approve of those treaties, then the treaty doesn't become law. Now, we'll talk later on about how presidents sometimes get around that with something called executive agreements. But the key for now is that the Senate acts as a check on the president, restrains the president. Because if the president knows that he needs 2/3 of the Senate in order to approve a treaty that the president has negotiated, the president's going to be in constant communication with the Senate. Hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. You guys okay with that? So the president may be the person who's there negotiating, but the president is also staying in touch with the Senate, or the leaders of the Senate more realistically, and making sure that at least 2/3 of the Senate are going to approve the treaty once the president brings it back and says, hey, here's the deal I negotiated. Again, all through our system, there are these checks and balances. The president can negotiate the treaties, but the Senate has to sign it, approve it. Now, the next section, I'm going to talk about the president's role as commander-in-chief. And the thing that I'm going to stress is that what it meant to be a commander-in-chief when the Constitution was originally ratified in the 1700s, and what it means to be commander-in-chief in the 21st century are entirely different things. But I'll talk about that more in the next video.